Is another pandemic just around the corner? I hope not. Fight around the origins of COVID-19, including whether or not the virus emerged from a lab, is casting a chill over virology research, according to new reporting from the New York Times. Woe is me. Scientists who are conducting gain-of-function research say that heightened fears of lab leak preventing studies that could curb the next pandemic virus? The heating debate is drying up funding for scientists who collect or alter dangerous pathogens.
At Pennsylvania State University, for example, a proposal for an experiment on a bird flu virus passed the government's most rigorous biosafety review, but the National Institutes of Health reportedly told the scientist behind the studies, Troy Sutton, to pursue different experiments, referring to the controversy over the lab leak theory. Also in Washington, international development officials curtailed a $125 million program to collect animal viruses on several continents after two Republican senators demand the project end.
The New York Times reports that nearly 24 virologists elsewhere in the United States described a profession-wide retreat from sensitive experiments. In response to this reporting, U.S. Right to Know reporter Emily Kopp wrote on X, "This summer, we learned the gain-of-function virologist behind doomsday flu helped ghostwrite a paper stigmatizing the lab leak theory with the aim of, quote, avoiding new biosafety discussions that could obstruct his research. We also learned the authors of the paper conspired to deceive a New York Times reporter. By fall, we have a New York Times story about how the lab leak theory obstructs research that avoids mentioning all of that uncomfortable stuff." So I read this article, which is almost trying to get me on its side because it's calling out all the annoying government-mandated reviews the scientists have to go to, and as a libertarian, it's like pulling at my heartstrings. But it is in service of making sure the experiments being conducted in the gain-of-function field are in fact safe. And it kind of the tone of the whole article is they could be preventing the next pandemic, but because you all asked really uncomfortable questions about gain-of-function, now they throw up their hands and say, we're not even going to bother. It's too hard to get anything approved. Which, look, fine. If the gain-of-function research is very important to preventing the next pandemic, sure, we want them involved in that. But we've already seen all of the faulty practices they had for the previous research. The fact that this was being conducted in an unsafe lab in China. That I think that a reasonable person has just lost faith in these kinds of experiments unless rigorously subjected to oversight. So they interview one scientist in it who's like, look, I think doing this research is valuable, but I understand that the American public is very concerned, and it is government money, so we do have to accept that there's going to be strings attached to it, just like everything else.
What I would hate to happen is to have proven the instincts right of those people who went out of their way to deny lab leak theory, to lie about what they knew was the possibility of lab leak theory in order to protect their research, because they believe that if it were in fact lab leak theory, that all similar research, no matter how beneficial to the public interest or no matter how safely it was conducted, would be shut down. Do you know what I'm saying? So I would like the response to be accurate and proportional, or else the people who wanted to hide lab leak could be justified in doing so. If the issue wasn't, it seems very much from the evidence that it was, that safety protocols that should have been in place for this kind of research were not in place. That should be the target of the critique. If it is the case that research is being conducted that really isn't especially well tailored to having any kind of broad public benefit, it's just kind of curiosity and it hasn't really come to anything really useful, then it shouldn't be pursued. But if it is potentially useful and it can be done safely, I would hate it to be the case that people aren't able to pursue this kind of research. And I do wish some of the criticism had been along those lines. I do think there is some worry now that because of the politicization of this issue, because lab leak theory has been for about 2 years kept out of the mainstream conversation, that we just don't get any more useful research anymore because people didn't sufficiently narrowly tailor the criticism here.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. But often when they describe what's going on in the gain-of-function research and they say, why it's important, I wish that scientists honestly need to do a better job of if they want to keep doing this, of educating the American public, I think, for what is the specific value they're getting out of it. Because they'll often say, curiosity is exactly right. They'll say, oh, well, now we learned that this virus could theoretically, infect humans. Like, okay. And you also made that more likely because you did that to the virus. Maybe you did it in safe conditions, so it's never going to hurt anyone. But you just did that. You confirmed a hunch. That's not the same as saying, and we came up with this therapy to deal with it, or this vaccine, or this antibiotic, or something, or some treatment. It's just it does seem like abstract curiosity sometimes.
But it is also true. We have to acknowledge that it is also true that that's how science often operates. You discover penicillin because your little bacteria trays show that everything was dying around this one little bacteria. And you're like, wait, what was killing off all of this crap? Oh, wow, it's penicillin. Mm-hmm. Sometimes things are accidents. And that's a tricky thing. Maybe we do want to curtail that kind of experimentation if there's so many potential downstream effects. But maybe it means we do allow the experimentation, but we allow it in a very safe lab that's in Antarctica somewhere, away from everybody else. The point of gain-of-function research
is to study the moon.
It has to be the moon. It has to be the moon. But the idea that you want to study the transmissibility of pathogens seems obvious, especially after COVID. The idea that you want to be able to better understand what kind of interventions in the context of a COVID pandemic actually work, whether if something is airborne, if masks work, if certain kinds of masks work, if air ventilation systems work, seems obvious. In some ways, COVID is the reason to do gain-of-function research, except for that it may have started from a lab.
Yeah, but that's a big except for.
Right, but
I pretty glaring one.
I do want to focus on the but for started from a lab piece of it, and can you prevent something from leaking from a lab? And if the answer is no, the answer is no. But I'm just not confident. When you look at the long list of violations at these labs, to me that's like, you messed up. Not, oh, this virus is so strong and so powerful and it can bust through walls like the Kool-Aid man that we can't possibly have this research. It just doesn't feel like we're there yet.
Well, but we can look at we're lucky with a lot of the lab leaks because there have been, lab leaks I was reading about a lab leak in the UK of smallpox. Yeah. That is the last person, I think, on Earth to ever die of smallpox was this British woman who worked at a university where they had kept, and they still don't understand how it got out. They don't know what happened, but this woman contracted smallpox. She eventually died from it. No one else got infected, but she developed lesions all over. She died. The scientist who was the head of the medical research wing, who knew immediately when he looked at the cell samples, that's what it was. He killed himself. Oh. And we don't know how it got out, and it only killed one person. But that's scary. It's scary. It's terrifying.
Here's what we know: Wuhan has a population of 11 million people.
Yeah.
That's like New York sized.
Yeah.
It's a small city in China, but it's a big city anywhere else. And putting labs where they're doing this kind of research in that kind of a densely populated urban area seems like a bad idea. Yeah. Putting it in a city with 500,000 people seems like a bad idea.
In the hands of people who were who did not strictly follow safety protocols, it sounds like they weren't properly washing down the walls. Like the whole facility was made of balsa wood or something, not literally, but you know what I'm saying? Come on, take this seriously.
Yeah.
And again, not to make it all about Dr. Fauci, but the way he doesn't even remember which experiments he signed off on during the government-issued pause makes it sound like he wasn't taking the safety risk seriously.
They were not taking this seriously. Sounds like, Robby, we're in agreement. We need more regulations here.
It breaks my little heart but you know what? I won't even contradict you here on this one narrow subject. I like to call it oversight because I can't. The R word, it hurts me. It's so painful.
The R word. By the way, did you see there was an article about how Israel used to consider the R word, and everyone's like, "What is that?" It was restraint.
Oh. That's a fine R word. There's some fine R words. Robby is a fine R word. All right, let's rap, not an R word. W. More rising after this.